Trojan horses inspired from Greek literature have become a fairly recognized threat in their analog and digital forms. There are all sorts of other hostile actors lurking at the gates of any organization's supposed digital fortress, constantly assessing weaknesses in foundations and trying to find out the best points of intrusion. In any fort, maintaining that defensive perimeter is a shared responsibility. And in a time where companies are expected to enable safe virtual workspaces for employees or partners and secure transaction points for customers, making sure that a layer of security is incorporated in current or upcoming use cases using on and off premises cloud infrastructure becomes all the more important. So, how do you properly plan and define the line between your organization's responsibilities and those of your providers as you move data, applications, containers, and workloads to the cloud to mitigate the risk of introducing vulnerabilities in your enterprise architecture? That's what we're here to find out in this panel titled Cloud Security is a Shared Responsibility. Who is managing your share? I'm your host, Gautam Srinivasan, and joining me are experts and leaders from a variety of industries who will share their experience and insights on the topic. Let me quickly introduce them to you, starting with Kirti Patel, Joint President and CTO for Kotak Mahindra Life Insurance, Baiju Joseph, who's the CTO at Future Generali Insurance, Priya Kanduri, CTO and Vice President for Cyber Security Services at IT services firm Happiest Minds, Rahul Moni, CTO and Chief Information Security Officer at Absolute Data Research and Analytics Solutions, and finally, Rajarshi Puryakastha, who's the Head of Pre-Sales in India and Middle East, Central Asia and Africa for Tata Communications. Ladies and gentlemen, great to see all of you as part of this conversation. I guess if security lies at the root of happiness, let's explore how we can make this tree of business stronger. But before that, here's a reminder to the audience as well that you could ask questions via the chat option, which is available on the platform. And once we are done with the Q&A between me and the speakers, if we have the time, we'll take 2 or 3. The format would be you write your name, you write the name of the speaker you would like to answer the question to, and then write the question that you have. All right, Priya, let's start with you. We are in the new normal. Work from home has been the norm for the past year. More and more companies, of course, are using the cloud, leveraging more analytics, deploying more automation, and of course, launching microservices. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I read somewhere that the average enterprise has 900 applications. Now, considering all these new avenues of intrusion opening up, what, in your opinion, are the top 3 security threats facing businesses today?
Hi, Gautam. Thank you for the warm welcome. Security threats, of course, like you said, they have really been on the rise in the last 1 year. 600% increase in specific forms of malware attacks. If we look at, if I have to address that question technically, we all know, if we just analyze the last 1 year data, the top 5 most repeating cyber attacks have been ransomware attacks, phishing, cryptojacking, IoT attacks. Most have resulted in large data breach and data loss and potential reputation loss, etc. But like I said, that's the technical answer to the question. There are multiple solutions available in the market, anti-phishing, anti-malware, endpoint protection. A lot of these, the science is thoroughly analyzed and tools are available. But still organizations are not secure. What is preventing them from completely avoiding and preventing and protecting their enterprises from these risks, which is the real answer to the question. We all know the attacks, we all know the answers, but what's really stopping us is, in my opinion, are 3 things. The first one is there are too many technologies and solutions. So what's the right fit? Which one do we implement? And on an average, an enterprise nowadays has anywhere between 20 to 50 security controls. Are they all doing the job? And sometimes there is an impression that you just implement the niche tool and then the problem is gone. That's not how it works. Keeping it up to date, bringing them together. Sometimes you are probably more secure with less number of tools than 50 to 100 number of point-based solutions. That's one of the real problems, finding the right technology, implementing it right, and protecting it. That, in my opinion, is the first challenge, which, in my career as well, and personally, professionally also, I come across a lot with dealing with our customers. The second challenge, of course, is people challenge. There are thousands of alerts, millions of alerts to process. An organization on an average has 10,000 alerts per day, a typical organization. The real challenge is having the manpower and efforts and time and money to process those and respond to those, which we are not able to do. There is shortage of skills, shortage of automation, shortage of focused efforts. And if all these have to be processed, the amount of processing time and technology and the resources that are required are not enough. And that's the second challenge. And the only solution to that is more and more automation. And the third, I would say, is again, there are too many devices in an enterprise, too much traffic, too much logs. What do we process and what do we not process? If there is enough time of them, then all the security threats are gone. But I mean, that's no brainer, but we are not able to do it because the resources are not unlimited, budgets are not unlimited. Finding the right tools to monitor, right devices to monitor, finding out what they are doing, what's the nature of data that's stored there, what are the accesses that are there, and then putting the right security controls. That's not a science that's easy to crack, though every CISO wants to do it. It's not so easy because it's an ever-changing landscape. New devices and applications are coming to picture, like you said, analytics, microservices, cloud. It's difficult to keep track and prioritize what we want to do. And that's the third most challenge. And that's a catch-up game. We keep doing it forever. Every day, that's the challenge for a CISO,
It's
if I would
always
say.
catch me if you can when it comes to
Focus.
security. Absolutely. It
Very
is
much.
always a
Very
catch-up
much.
game. And
Very
it's
much.
important to bring this point together. As you said, the security environment itself has changed. And as you listed out, considering the vast amount of tools at play, considering the attention required to manage those tools, and considering the amount of devices people are using, and of course the prioritization needed, this calls for a radical rethink of the way security itself is considered or defined. And I'll come to you, Rajarshi. Considering that the old way of thinking about security is out, how does a move to the cloud impact an organization's risk profile? And in your opinion, what are some of the top security threats that organizations face when using the cloud? Because the cloud is here to stay, and especially as we've seen over the past year, more and more companies are moving their operations to the cloud. So how does security fit in?
Okay, so very interesting points by Priya, and I'd just like to take you all back only 2 years. I'm not going to take you back a decade. 2 years back, when I used to have discussions with the CXOs, and I would tell them that, hey, you know what, cloud first, internet first is the strategy that you should be looking at. At that point of time, the feedback was that, Raj, you're making my network porous if you're actually taking me to internet, right? So if you have 20 offices, for example, and I'd say, connect all your 20 on internet, they would say my security architecture is just going to go for a toss, and I can't do that. Lo and behold, COVID comes in. Those 20 offices are now transformed into 10,000 offices, 50,000 offices, because everybody is working from home and the home has become an office, right? So rather than a porous network, your network is all over the place at this point of time, right? And therefore the security threat, which was there on a scale of 1 to 100, if it was at 5, suddenly the scale has increased beyond 100, if I can say that, right? And there was no choice for any company not to go for cloud and not to adopt internet. Otherwise, work from home is not going to happen. That brings a very different, perspective per se, right? And here, very interestingly, also we need to see that it's not only the employees which we need to think about; it's the customers also. your customers would no longer come to your offices. They would like to have a discussion on the internet, right? And they want to do business on internet. So your internet exposure has gone through the roof from that perspective, and therefore your cloud also exposure has also gone up. When both these things come together, while I can talk about, as Priya mentioned, there are 50 different topology answers that can come in, but the real pointer is, what is required for you. And there is where what we typically do is that we look at the business architecture or the enterprise architecture of the client, right? And the enterprise architecture of that specific enterprise would then determine what would be the best security architecture requirement. And no two organizations will be similar. Even in the same vertical, it may not be similar, because the way you're doing business, the way you're contacting customers, the way your employees are using your business apps, and even your business apps. So for example, somebody may be using Zoom and somebody may be using Teams, right? And therefore the requirement may be different, and that's where the entire architecture rethink needs to be done. That being said, there are some base technologies which needs to be looked at, right? Starting from your endpoint security to network security, perimeter security, and so on and so forth. And most importantly, one point that Priya mentioned, right? What do we do with all the information that is coming in? And that's where something like an SIEM or a SOAR architecture is the next answer, in terms of ensuring that the data feeds that are coming in, they're not hogging your bandwidth. They're actually being presented to you in a manner wherein you're not getting data, but insights or action points that you can work on, right? So, the whole cloud and the internet shift, which is happening, it's here to stay. It will only grow. And therefore, mapping the journey of security to this, in terms of looking at where do your enterprise architecture is taking you, and what are the things that you need to do going forward, is what is extremely important for all the organizations to do. Gautam, back to
All
you.
right. All right. Following up on that, let's bring in the experience of the industry leaders from insurance that we have with us on the panel. Baiju, we'll come to you for this. We have seen insurance companies effectively leveraging digital tools to service customers, with, I believe, over 93% of your new customers being acquired digitally during this pandemic, compared to 60% in 2019. Now that dependency on physical verifications has been replaced with online KYC, and self-service portals are being used, supported by, let's say, AI chatbots and WhatsApp-based messaging solutions, while regulations are also containerized in a sandbox to enable the least disruption in service. Do you see more aggressive digital transformation taking place in the insurance sector from here on? What are the latest trends you see basis what's happening? Because we're trying to divvy up the discussion from a threats faced to a threats resolved perspective. So let's see where the trends are headed. So from your instance, what would you say?
Interesting point. So, happened to see in recent years, at least last 2 years, a regulator actually push or support a digital adoption or a transformative way of conducting business. That means be nimble, be ensure that you are policyholder centric. Whatever you do, you should be around policyholder centric. Do right sales. So it is very supportive, unlike maybe earlier. But I just
Hmm.
want to bring two three things additional to it. What they also additionally add to it. So while you also know around the world, regulatory changes in the financial sector is increasing at the staggering rate.
Hmm.
So coping up with the sheer volume of new regulatory changes that imposes a high complexity on stringent timelines on any financial institution. Kirti can watch for that, because we are meeting the regulatory needs which is keep on imposing on us.
Hmm.
And if you look at the past decade till probably, I just exclude the last 2 years, the growth and the need was okay. There was no penalties if you float, if you leak some data, of customer. There was no such penalty. Of course, you need justifications, but now that's all changed. You will be penalized for not doing things right. That is documented. That's been written.
Mm,
So, I mean, undertaking modernization is very encouraged, even pushed, but not at the cost of doing or losing some data from in the organizations at all. So
mm,
I just want to give you some numbers which 10 to 15 percentage workforce in the IT and the compliance. Okay, I'm not saying only working on regulatory or meeting security needs of the organizations.
mm,
That is too high. Second, spending on compliance per se. Okay, I'm not looking at IT security as separate. All
mm,
complaints need to ensure that we are protecting policyholders' informations are drastically increased since last 2 years. So that itself, that means 15 percentage of IT budget is just allocated to IT security initiatives, which was
mm,
not. It was would have been 2% to 3% earlier, and frequent additions of digital transformations and these regulatory circulars keep on coming on circular, which adds to these cost as well. Okay, every time circular, at recent circular, I mean, at least Kirti will tell us the every change which we put it into production must be gone through a VAPT black box testing as well as this, and then only you promote it. Okay,
mm.
of course, this has been filed and represented, but that's they are right. That's the way it has to be. But that is putting a kind of pressure on IT team to do the change cycle or limit the change cycle. Unlike earlier, we used to do 52 change cycle a year. Now you start stopping that, reducing it to ensure that you are more secure enough.
You're going to be
So
busier than ever.
yeah, it's busy than ever. So you imagine, and all these challenges are expected to continue and to become more complex. I'm telling you, more complex is going to be next at least 1 or 2 years.
Mm,
So it is necessary, FI, that is financial institution, any BFSI, think long term, be technology driven than a human or just a policy. Policy doesn't help, process doesn't help. We need to be
mm.
analytical driven. We have to have machine learning or AI driven to understand so much of logs coming in on your way and make sure you act on those anomalies or identify them and act on that quickly. Otherwise, you will be taken on a complete ride, right? So apart from improving overall security posture of the organization, IT has become now a compliance. We need to ensure that entire organization compliance towards external facing, whether the customer, distributor, as well as regulator. So
Mm.
IT's role is changed. IT has become a interface to everyone. So we need to ensure that we are technology talks the walk. I mean, yeah, rather than a people, does the process or policies.
Rather than ancillary, you need to be the focus, and you need to think long term. That's the message coming out. Interesting. Kirti, let me come to you. You look after a large infrastructure of over 16,000 employees across 250 plus locations. Now, considering the claim of Kotak Mahindra Life Insurance to be the first insurance company in the industry to start the virtualization journey, in your experience, which transformative cloud solutions can, say, companies look at to reduce costs, increase agility, and enhance scalability? Because as Baiju mentioned, you're going to be more busier than ever. In fact, the role of technology leaders across industry is going to be very busy over the next few years. But especially as the conversation in the C-suite turns around to scalability, agility, and more importantly, ROI. How do you see things headed, and how do you see the cloud benefiting you?
Thank you, Gautam. Nice question, and thank you, Priya and Rajesh and Baiju, to set the tone for this. Before I answer your question, I want to talk a couple of things about security. I hope that is okay.
Sure.
One is that uh, digital transformation without security transformation is not going to take us anywhere. That's the first thing I want to say. Second thing is we have been talking about necessity of having a digital mindset in the organization to be able to transform the business. I am saying that that mindset is also required within the technology teams to be able to transform technology and to be able to transform security. And when I say security transformation, we can't look at it as a bolted on thing, but it has to be built in. So it is not security or innovation. It is not security or transformation. It is and. So it has to coexist. The third thing is about the industry that I want to mention here. Yes, regulator is driving it, governments are pushing it. It is on the agenda of every board. Uh, Regulators meetings with CEOs also have cybersecurity on the agenda. But what is different for the life insurance industry, especially, is that not only do we carry the PII, we carry financial information of customers and also medical information of customers, and all our business is long term. So we need to keep this information with us for the long term. So for us, it is an added responsibility. Now answering your question about the cloud. I said transformation is given, Baiju said long term, I agree with all that. But I don't think CIOs should look at cloud as an objective. For me, it is a business problem that one is trying to solve. The business problem could be a business process that you want to transform, or it could be scale that you want to bring in, or you want to have a secure solution. If that solution requires going to the cloud, then you should go to the cloud. Okay, so I don't think
So could you give some instances on that, as in how it has helped you solve the problem?
I will. So you spoke about the virtualization journey that we took. It was on-prem, okay, because we initiated it 3 years ago. It was really, at that time, nobody thought that people would want to work from home. So it was maybe ahead of time. We said we want to put it, be on-prem, and we continued to be on-prem. Our BCP was work from home, was on-prem. Exactly a year ago, when we wanted to scale, we did evaluate moving our virtual desktop infrastructure to the cloud, and we chose to continue to be on-prem, okay, because it did not make sense to us, okay. So it's not the cloud, it's the solution. But there are solutions which we took to the cloud before the pandemic hit us, and also after the pandemic hit us. And I'll take one example of a different use case that we had to service, okay, which is how do we contact our prospects when we are sitting at home. Okay, prospect is at home. It could be a prospect advisor, it could be a prospect customer. I send a Zoom link. The prospect may not even have the Zoom app. Okay, may not be comfortable using Zoom or Google Meet, because may not be technology savvy, may have heard something about these platforms. So how do we do that? So we built our own small virtual meeting app. Okay, we call it Kodak Live Meet, KLI Meet. And it is very simple to use. A simple link goes, customer doesn't need to have a particular iOS, particular operating system on the mobile phone, or particular app, just clicks on the link, gives an OTP, and is connected. Now that is something I did not want to bring to the on-prem, right? I mean, absolutely not. That workload was very clearly meant for the cloud. So from day one, it went to the cloud. SaaS, okay, software as a service solutions, work beautifully because the solution is ready. Go to market time is absolutely less. Those solutions on the cloud, we are okay. Okay, so we have a hybrid strategy. For us, it is the workload which determines what should go to the cloud and what should remain on-prem.
Absolutely, and we see something similar in the banking industry as well, right? Because core banking and other apps, they are on-prem, while CX and other experiences are off-prem for scalability. Fair point. It's the context of your needs which determines the solutions you should employ. And as you say, there is no digital transformation without security transformation, which I believe is a very important message coming out of this discussion. Let's go to you, Rahul. You wear many hats, a CIO, a startup founder, avid coder. You and your company work with many Fortune 500 clients in a variety of industries across 40 countries. So I'll come to you for a broader perspective. In your experience, what's the level of cloud literacy currently within organizations, and how big, most importantly, is the problem of skills shortage when it comes to tackling cybersecurity? Because we can talk broadly about security and transformation, but at the end of the day, there needs to be somebody driving the engine, and they need to know how to drive the engine. So what's your view of this?
Okay, Gautam, the one point which you picked, which is skills, we have all been talking about just about 2 years ago and so on and so forth. And if you look at it very pragmatically, 5 years ago, security was kind of a necessary evil. You threw a couple of firewalls at it and stayed happy. Okay, yes, we've got state-of-the-art firewall. If you had a little network linkage and would pop up an SMS onto your phone, you're happy and you're on top of technology, right? And as was mentioned earlier in the discussion, somebody's inverted the network totally. What was the door is now the center of the network, and everybody else is around it trying to come in. And because of this duration of 5 years or 7 years, I mean, you can play around and extend it. The number of people who have an understanding of this is limited. Skill sets are in dire shortage. There is absolutely no argument about that. Understanding at the top levels is happening now. Up to quite some time, I think all of us would have fought a battle with the board members saying, why do you need so much of money for the security stuff? You were happy with those firewalls of yours earlier. Now why are you talking about endpoint detection and response, and why are you talking about cloud security? So that education is also pretty important, because at the end of the business has to understand that for business to run carefully, they need to spend money in this thing called IT security, which was in the background, right?
It was in the fringes.
Yeah, it was something. Okay, fine. Just give them some money every year. They'll look after everything and keep it running. Whereas now it's different. I mean, you take anything, your development pipeline, CI/CD, you need security. Guys, the coders need to have an awareness of security. One very common problem, which if you're looking at understanding cloud security, all these kind of things, one basic issue. A lot of dev chaps still have the lift and shift mindset. I need so many CPUs, so much of RAM. Get approval from the manager, put that thing on the cloud, and keep running it 7/24.
Mm-hmm.
End of the month, one massive bill comes. CFO loses his cool, saying, "What are you jokers doing?" And somebody says, "Oh, I forgot to switch it off, or I forgot to scale it up." That's the problem with cloud literacy. It's getting that basic. So that's the scenario.
The issue is that in the world of security, right? The good guys need to keep winning again and again, but the bad guys just need to win once, and then we all know. Because when the good guys win again and again, nobody knows it. Things just seem normal. But it's when the bad guys win, we all know it's in the headlines.
The stats are going crazy. I mean, you're talking about some kind of ransomware attack every 8 minutes. It's crazy numbers. How are you going to handle it? I mean, all of us saying the same thing. The volume of data, the ability to process that data in time. We're looking at what, on an average, my SIM throws up about 3 to 4,000 high-level events, which means 3 to 4,000 patches have to go on to the network every day. It has to be done, and it has to be done fast and seamlessly without affecting it. And therefore, you have to have these guys who understand what they're doing behind that. That's where your skills come.
All right, fair point. Rajesh, let me bring you in. So do you see providers of these solutions, as you say, architect solutions for your clients? Do you see that role being more of a referee, being more of a coach than a referee? Because as we see, there's a skills shortage. There's the time taken, the lag between understanding and implementing. So your role as a provider, do you see now it evolving more to be a coach rather than a referee, where as you create solutions for enterprises?
Okay, so I'll just pick up something from what Rahul mentioned, right? Around just before COVID, what used to happen is that when we would go to a CISO, the CISO would tell us that, please help us sell security, because the CFO would not really understand beyond a firewall, and they would say that you're a firewall and you're secure enough. We have to give credit to the board also, because in the last 2 years, the board has actually skilled themselves up on security, and they now know what security is all about, and why the CISOs were pushing it so hard, because it became extremely real. And in this journey, a CISO has now become a vital function in the organization, right? And therefore, our role or our interactions with the CISO or the security organization has also changed a bit. Now we don't need to kind of help the CISO cell. We need to help the CISO ensure that they are meeting their requirements. As Kirti was rightly mentioning, that going back to the enterprise architecture, right? Your enterprise architecture may demand a different kind of a implementation, and therefore your security requirement may be very different, right? Keeping the basics in place, and therefore what happens from our side today is that clear two things which is an ask from the CISOs. One is, tell me what's happening here and now, and what should I be doing given that my business architecture and therefore say my app architecture is this, right? And I'm hosted here. And if my plans to grow is like this. So for example, in this period, we are also seeing a lot of M&As, right? When M&As come in, there are issues because, when you acquire a company, when you merge with somebody else, their architecture may be very different from yours, right? And no CEO or CFO would say, okay, you'll take 2 years to bring things on an optimal level. They want everything here and now, like yesterday, right? And that's where the next thing, next big thing which is going to come in, or the next wave which is here, and so on and so forth, is where our role also comes in. So it's a mix of referee and coach, I'd say. The coach would be for the future, and the referee would be for the here and now kind of thing, where they would also like to say, have you done this before? Is somebody else doing this? Who has done this in my industry? Do you have use cases, references, etc., etc.? Because I want to know if this is working, and if it is working with customers similar to my size, similar in my industry, and so on and so forth. I'm sure everybody is nodding their. I can see Rahul is nodding his head. So that's what they ask us, right? I want to know this, man. You please give me the answer. So it's a combination, I'd say, Gautam.
All right. Well, the game is always on when it comes to security. So far, we have discussed threat perception. I'd like to now segue the discussion into threat resolution, and also a reminder to the audience that if you have any questions to the panelists, you can access the Q&A section in the chat and then address a question to a particular panelist and also write in your name. So it'll be easier for us to read out. When we have the time, we'll select 2 or 3. But again, coming back to threat resolution, Priya, what can be done now to improve, predict threats and deal with them in a more proactive way rather than a reactive manner? We do have AI, ML, the power of AI, ML, a lot of solutions on that front coming forward. And the need of the market is now more in an anticipatory sense, so that you don't have to, face the blowback when you are reactive. So from a proactive perspective, what can be done to deal with security issues?
Yeah, certain aspects of protection and prevention, they are offered by default by the cloud. For example, availability, scalability, your fail-safe, failover, etc., are given by default by by your cloud providers. As Kirti mentioned, more and more cloud adoption with a security implementation, security vision strategy definitely helps, because some of the earlier security controls, even a firewall used to take a long time to implement. Faster, easier are the SaaS-based security controls. So the real solution is multiple layers of security, because definitely it's not something that's done once and done forever. Multiple layers of security, adoption of the new generation areas in terms of, as much as possible, move to the edge, move to the, from the perimeter, move it to the edge based controls. That would definitely offer. And the good old techniques of continuous risk assessments, least privileges implementation, zero trust, they're never going to go away. In fact, they're going to become more and more important with the current trend of everything, the boundaries completely disappearing. Now consumers are everywhere, your employees are everywhere, data is supposed to be made available from everywhere. So some of these traditional techniques of keeping it safe all the time, least privileges, etc., we cannot move away from those. And a very, very important point that almost everybody touched upon is securing an enterprise is possible, but it requires a lot of skilled manpower, which is scarce right now, which only means the other possible solution to keep safe all the time is as much automation as possible. The SIMs clubbed with the SOAR technology is definitely need of the hour, because even Rahul mentioned thousands of alerts every day. We don't have time to look at all of those, prioritize all of those, remove duplications, remove false positives. And as you mentioned, one miss is good enough to top the headlines. As much automation as possible is definitely of the hour, and literally continuous end user education and awareness. We cannot move away from that. That's very, very important. Because most of your ransomwares and malware attacks are eventually a result of some end user not following the policy or guideline. That's also very, very critical. So if I just have to sum it up, as much automation as possible, as much security as a service adoption possible, continuous risk assessments, continuous user awareness, and as much edge-based security as possible, which was just a vision 1 year ago. Pre-pandemic days, edge security was just talked about, but now it's a reality, and it's really the need of the hour. Because we cannot let bad traffic or anything come into the network, then detect it, then prevent it. We are just losing time, and that's good enough to have a compromised network. Move as much as possible to the edge.
In that context, I also wonder, considering a lot of the players in the BFSI space, they operate on a hybrid approach. How can security policy then be consistent across the digital estate? That's going to be my next question, and I'll address this question to you first, Kirti, and then I'll come to you, Baiju, your views. Kirti, you mentioned that you started off on-prem, but now some of the apps are off-prem. Pretty much, it's by the book for a lot of the financial sector players. But as to my question of how do you ensure the security policy being consistent across the digital space, what's your view on this, Kirti?
So that is a wonderful question, Gautam. It is very important that the policy has to be aligned, okay? And I have a different view than what Priya said, okay? And maybe a clarification. Yeah, all these things are easy on the cloud, but you have to still ask for them and implement them, okay? Just by moving your workload to the cloud, you're not going to be secure, okay? That is the message that I want to give to everybody here. So it's very important that you have the same policy that you had on-prem, whatever controls you were wanting to have, whatever threats that you were wanting to address, you would want to address those threats on the cloud as well. You need to take effort, okay? My message is that it is not easy, okay? Maybe easier than doing it on-prem, but it is not really plug and play, okay? Just by subscribing to something on AWS, it's not secure, okay? That is the first thing I want to say here. Alignment, why is alignment important, okay? We spoke about so many devices that we are controlling. It spoke about so much data that is getting collected by the SIM. Now, if you add one more complexity to it, the life of the CISO will be very difficult. Okay. For example, if you have two different VAPs, you have two different types of load balancers, two different types of firewalls. Okay. I mean, and we also spoke about skills, right? We have reached that level of skills. They are able to understand this. The SIM is all configured, working well. And now you bring the cloud with different sets of such tools, it is going to be complex, okay? So you choose one, you may choose to move to a different one because the cloud is giving you an opportunity. But eventually, I think it would make sense to align wherever possible, okay? Not only the policy, but also the controls and the tools that you are implementing. Because it is also important, along with the alignment of the policy and the control tools, you need to have a single glass pane for the infrastructure guys or for the CISOs, okay? We don't want them to look at multiple things, right? We want them to be agile. We want to react quickly if there is something that is happening. So it is important to get alignment there as well. And eventually,
Okay.
when you align, there will be cost saving. There will be cost saving. So it is
That's the key
absolutely.
there. I think that's going to be one of the most important drivers for alignment of security along with other applications from a cost savings perspective. If do you have another point to add there, Kirti?
I just wanted to add one point here, okay, and which is a CTO view that I want to bring to the whole security thing, right?
Mm,
We are talking about uh, uh, about how do I identify the threat. But if the final thing that you have to do is to actually control the host, okay, VAPT is easy to do. I can automate, right? But I still have
mm,
to go and patch, correct?
mm.
And that is the real challenge that the CTO has. It is the 50 security controls, but it is the 105 different technologies that are running in the firm. How do we
Mm.
ensure that we patch them on time, patch them with zero impact to the business? Okay, that is actually something that really worries me. And
All right, let's
I'm
see
sure
what solutions come up there. I'm sure somebody is already thinking about it. But coming to you, Baiju, the same question: maintaining consistency across the digital estate, especially considering, as you said earlier, it's going to be busier than ever for technology leaders, and I believe, especially for your companies. When the lockdown came, you provided the IT infrastructure necessary to your employees within a week. So, how did you manage to have a consistent security policy across the digital estate?
Well, let me honest with you, it is difficult. Okay, so see, the business landscape actually demands multi-device, multi-vendor, multi-product, and I think people are talking. Priya and Kriti talked about the challenges. So maintaining consistent policy in these multi-product, multi-device environment is going to be very difficult. Let me tell you, all security teams and infrastructure teams have become Superman, Superwoman today. So they spend beyond normal office hours and do this in the nights because to have a zero impact probably in patching, okay, to the end customer. And the problem is it is purely putting pressure on admins. You understand the sysadmin skill levels, right? They are not CTO
Mm,
skill level or a CISO skill levels. They are just patching or maybe accommodating some vulnerabilities on particular server that may have an impact, testings, and then finally promoting it. All these are very, 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 big issues. But
mm.
the answer to the question which you asked is on a we somehow reason is CISOs become a product centric. That means this product sold, you bring all those products and put it in place.
Mm.
That's not the we need to change. I mean, of course, as a CTO and as a risk organization, we are actually in BFSI. We should see we need to move from a product centric to okay and having a simple zero trust one solutions which probably giving all this solution to maybe a view like you said a view which gives the admin or the probably this guy a solution so that
A
what could be the impact of this
consolidated
player.
view rather than a fragmented view. That's your point on this.
That's correct, that's correct.
All right. Keeping that in mind, Rahul, in your opinion, are the native security controls provided by cloud service providers adequate, or do they need to be supplemented by additional third-party security controls? Because there's always going to be this tug of war, especially from a client perspective. The client would always want an all-in-one approach. What's your view on this?
Okay, so the cloud service providers, the security which is provided is basic.
Hmm.
If you wanna stretch and dig deep into it, you have to understand that. Yes, there are a lot of APIs available. You can take that, but then you're essentially what you're then doing is building your complete security system using their core engines. Okay, and that's not viable for everybody to put in that kind of effort, have those kind of skill sets to be able to pull it out. You can use the cloud stuff for the very, very basic scenarios, but you have to have that clear understanding. You have to if I'm getting very basic, you have to know what ports to open, what ports to close. You have to know where to put a VPC, where not to put a VPC, where to have a public IP, where to stick the private IP. Those basics remain. Okay.
Hmm.
On top of that, like I said earlier, if you can dig deeper into the security controls, you could build a lot of stuff is built on that and offered as a service. But a far simpler and more practical approach is to take uh, a either a service offering or a product offering, depending on your IT team's skill level, implement it, implement it across the hybrid scenario of on-prem, multi-cloud, the entire works. It unless you are a you have a very specific line of business, it's doubtful you're going to stay single cloud, even if you're cloud, right? In BFSI, it will continue to be hybrid for quite some time until somebody gets that level of security on the cloud and signs on the dotted line committed,
Mm.
right? Today, it's a joint responsibility. Whether any cloud service provider, the biggest to somebody who's a niche player. Security is clearly mentioned in your contract document that it's a joint responsibility.
Mm.
If you are not careful, the service provider can only secure you up to a certain point. Beyond that, it's your risk. So yeah, you have to build on top of it, or give it to somebody else who can run it for you. Well, either of those things. But
All right.
again, bottom line, remember the basics. They help, always help.
Let me get in Rajarshi's reaction to that before I go into audience questions. And again, the point of shared responsibility, which is why we are all here, and we've discussed it in the context of threat perception and threat resolution. Rajarshi, how do you properly plan and define that line, between your organization's responsibilities and those of your providers? As I said earlier, as you move data, applications, containers, and workloads to the cloud to mitigate that risk of introducing vulnerabilities in your enterprise architecture.
Okay. So, Gautam, we need to look at it in a design architecture, right? So we follow some fundamentals, and those fundamentals are very simple to remember also. So the first fundamental is that we ensure that the design it's secure by design, right? Kirti also touched upon it. It's built in as not bolted. That's where secure by design comes in. Then when you implement to protect, right? So the thematics there is that how do you ensure that when you're implementing, during the implementation cycle, you are ensuring that everything is protected, right? And then you go into threat mitigation and threat detection and so on and so forth, right? Where the other points that you asked on in terms of AI, ML, etc., comes in, where proactive, reactive, all those pointers are brought in, right? So if you follow the fundamentals of this 3 or 4 things that I talked about, you'd see that it wouldn't make a lot of difference if you're there on-prem or on the cloud, because if you're secure by design, the architecture which is there, and it says that, hey, you need to do this following things, you will then ensure that whether you're on the cloud or you're on-prem or you have a desktop below your desk, you will follow those specific principles and deploy them in the architecture that you have, right? Many a times what happens, Gautam, is that if you do not have these design principles, it is done out of place, right? And that's where there's a difference of implementations or process, and Baiju touched upon that. It should not be process dependent, right, or people dependent, because then you are depending on somebody to actually drive it. It should be kind of a overall architecture and then driven by technology, and obviously people and process will come in to the entire picture, right? And that's where it is. Gautam, back to you.
It's always the bigger picture, right? Don't miss the woods for the trees. That's always that's a timeless message. All right. On that note, let's go into some audience questions, and let's see what's come up. Darshil Mehta has a question. Are the current security certifications enough to develop the required skills to counter the new increasing threat vectors with the advent of the cloud and a lot of the solutions? Let me point this question out to Rahul. Rahul, what's your view on this? Are the security certifications enough? We spoke earlier about the talent shortage in the industry. What's your view on this question from Darshil.
If you're talking about security certifications like the CISA, CISP, SSP, etc., they are more from an audit perspective rather than a hands-on scenario. So one needs to be very clear. Both are important, but they run almost parallelly. They rarely intersect. You will not have somebody who is looking on the audit, implementation, the overall policy kind of side, being able to get in, hack stuff, write code, uh, define your data warehouse for your AI ML to process the entire thing. So
Hmm.
one needs to be very specific about this, about the certifications, and understand the difference between the implementation side certifications and the audit side certifications. When I say implementation, I'm talking the hands-on, getting your hands dirty side of the business.
All right, that's Rahul's answer to Darshil. Let me take another question. This one comes from Ashish Khaneja. It's a two-part question to two different guests. So we'll take the question he's addressed to Kirti first, and then take the question which he's addressed to Rajarshi. So Ashish asks to Kirti, what changes from a security perspective when an application is moved from on-prem to cloud? So based on the conversation that you and I had earlier, Kirti, what would be your answer to Ashish?
In my mind, nothing changes. Okay, security has to be as it was, or maybe better. So, from a security point of view, nothing changes. So, I'll share our experience. Okay, when we decided to move to the cloud, we first built the security framework, and then we moved the workloads. It is like building your own data center all over again. What changes? In a traditional on-prem data center, you will have to release a purchase order, wait for the delivery, if it is an appliance or a hardware, or wait for the licenses to be downloaded. That changes, okay? If you want to get something, it is available with the click of a button. That for sure changes. But beyond that, nothing changes. You have to build the security as you would have built it. But if you are working in a hybrid scenario, then that is a change that will happen, because you have to look at the data ingress, egress. You have to look at how these things will coexist. So you have to look at the entire application architecture that Rajesh mentioned. Yeah, that is from
All
my
right.
side.
Well, in a sense, as they say, war never changes. So I guess we could fit that in our conversation and say security. The idea of security never changes. You have to be active 24/7. Let's come to Ashish's question to Rajarshi. Uh, his question is based on your customer engagement experience. What percentage of enterprise customers have a security architecture which is defined and aligned to the application architecture? What's the state of play? This is a question from Ashish to Rajarshi. What's your response, Rajarshi?
Okay, so Ashish, this is a good question, and it varies, right? Uh, Actually, we did a survey some time back with a few customers, and and there were around 350 odd CIOs that we reached out to. If you look at the percentages where they said a few things related to security, I'll just call out the numbers as I recall them. Uh, you know, for example, when you talk about WFH, right, and the application stack to WFH, how the entire stack is kind of stacking up from a security perspective. Around 40% of the CIOs felt that this stack is still not as secure as it should be, right? And specifically when it comes to cloud, around 37 to 40% again felt that they are not really truly protected at this point of time, and there can be some other things that needs to be done. So to answer your question, I would say that from my engagements with clients, I'd say 50% is the number. One in one, or 5 in 10 is where you'd say that they'd say yes, it is somewhat aligned, and some would say it is not. If I could just add to one point for the question that was to Kirti, and this is again something that I'm seeing for specific clients, where from shift to on-prem to cloud, one question that comes in is where is your data, right?
Hmm.
And if data localization and physical survey is important for that industry, specifically, basis regulation or something like that. That is a huge, question that comes in from a security perspective, specifically when it comes to the cloud setup, right? Because in cloud, if you go to AWS, if they say that India is a region and some other regions, so Singapore is another region, how do you do physical, physical survey of where your data is? Even in the India region, how do you do that? So that may become a question mark from a cloud shift perspective.
And also an extension of that, and this is the last question I'll take from the audience. This one comes from Kamal Ghari, is how to evaluate a security partner to secure on-prem and cloud applications. So what would you say to that as we wrap up this conversation?
Okay, so all the big wigs out here, Kirti, Baiju, Priya, they would be better positioned. But I'll say from my experience, right? See, one thing that Rahul mentioned actually stuck a chord with me. One is certification, right? You can ask that how many certified people do you have and so on and so forth. But certification doesn't tell you that, whether the problem will be solved or not. Experience tells whether the problem will be solved or not, right? And we have seen enough and more examples where experience solves faster than certification. And one thing that stands out, therefore, is when I go and have that final discussion with the customer. In that final discussions, two questions that always come in is: do you have somebody of similar complexity as mine? How many issues have they faced in the last 1 year? And those issues, how have you resolved, right? When we answer these two questions to their satisfaction, so if Kirti tomorrow asks me this question and if I can answer this satisfactorily, she will consider me. Otherwise, I'm out of a door, right? That's how I'll put it.
It's always experience, and I guess using that word in the context of security, I could say working safely may get old, but so do those who practice it. I guess that's something we could all think about. But on that note, I'll wrap up this discussion. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and I really appreciate all the panelists for taking the time and sharing their thoughts on this webcast. I also request all the audience members to fill a short survey as you exit the show. And of course, we'd also like to thank you for joining us in this discussion and watching this webcast. And last but not the least, thank you to Tata Communications as well for partnering with us for this series. I hope all of you have a great day. This is Gautam Srinivasan signing off.